Yitzchak und von Yaakov. Bahit der lieber Volk Yisroel von allem Besen in deinem Leib. Als der liebe Shabbos Kodesh geht weg und als die Wochen der Kodesh und der Jahr soll uns zukommen zum Muna Shalom, zum Munas Chachamim, zu Avas Chaverim, zu Dveikus Aboire Baruch Hu. Mamin zu sein, משלוש עיקרים שלו, ובגאולה קרובה במהרה בימינו, ובזכיית המתים, ובנבואת משה רבינו, עולו ושלום. ריבונו של העולם, du bist doch ein neues Elohim Koyach. Gib deine Liebe, jüdische Kinder, lach auch Koyach, dich zu leuben und auch dich zu dienen. Und weiter kann anderen Cholile nicht. Und als die Wochen der Chodesh und der Jahr soll uns zukommen zu Gesund und zu Masel und zu Bracha und Atzlacha und zu Bonei Chayei Arichei und Mezoinei Revichei V'siyata Dishmaya Lanu Ulechol Yisroel V'noi Maro.
Welcome to Headlines. This is David Lichtenstein. Tonight we're going to have a really interesting discussion. So many of us were overjoyed to see what we considered really an act of rishis, an act of injustice, with the commutation of the prison sentence, the 27-year prison sentence that was given to Shalom Mordechai Rubashkin, a father of 10, 27 years when you had Michael Peppel, he stole $18 million loss. He was initially given 7 days in jail, and then it was upon appeal, it was increased to 2 years in jail. You have the fellow from SAC, Martoma, who was given 9 years on a $276 million theft. So, look, the fact that a great injustice was done here was without a doubt, and we were all overjoyed to see the father back with his children. We said 8 years was more than enough. But here's the question. If you go to sites like Yeshiva World, etc., you see comments like, this is an extension of what happened to Yosef HaTzadik, to the Maram Rutenberg, the Balatanya, the Ruzhina, the Skalena, and Shalom Rubashkin's freedom from prison. Which is why in many circles I saw in many yeshivas, he's going there and they're making parties, he's giving out chamashim and candies, etc. And we're going to have two Rabbanim today who are discussing whether all this victory lap or whether this deification, is it really appropriate? And we're going to have a discussion about that. We're going to have on Rabbi Bechoffer and Rabbi Horowitz. And on the other side of it, we will have his lawyer, Gary Apfel, really an exceptional story. 4.5 years he did this pro bono. Imagine. The Rubashkins had raised, Klal Yisrael, Lakewood, Satmar, Chabad had raised over $10 or $15 million for him, which went to a number of attorneys who did absolutely, it seems, nothing. And the Yeshua came from somebody, or well, maybe they did, so I'm going to be criticized for that. But here's a Yid, Gary Apfel, who spent 4.5 years pro bono. You talk about somebody who found his view, his story, his mission. That should be a really fascinating discussion. We're also going to have on a big Rav from Eretz Yisrael discussing about Birchas Hagomel. What do you make? Do you make a Birchas Hagomel when you leave prison? And you're going to find that it's quite complicated. It's not nearly what you thought. We're going to go into discussion. And since we're talking about Birchas Hagomel, we're also going to be speaking to Rabbi Pfeffer. was on the Dayan on Russia Weiss's Bezdin. He's a member of very prominent Bezdin Eretz Yisrael. He's a writer, etc. A prominent Poisik in Eretz Yisrael. He's going to be speaking about Birchas Hagomel together with Rabbi Langer. If somebody who leaves prison, make a Birchas Hagomel. And we'll go from there. Do women bake Birchas Hagomel? Is it appropriate today to make a Birchas Hagomel after flying? I mean, two people, they take their family, they go to a hotel in Eretz Yisrael for the, they travel, they're eating first class or business class or economy, and they're eating, their food, and they're staying in a hotel, and you say, this is dangerous? I mean, really, would you take your family there? So we'll be speaking about Birchas Hagomel. So this should be a fascinating program. I'm sure we'll get a lot of comments. Again, we post all the comments, the people who say whose strongest disagreement, those, we put them all up. I believe that, the Torah believes in discussion and debate. There was always machlokes ben chachamim. From the beginning of the Mishnah till today, there's only one parak in entire Mishnayos that doesn't have a machlokes, and that's Eze Mekaymin Shel Zvachim. And the Baalei Machshava say when they talk about the Klal Yisrael was always considered the Zvachim. When it came to Eze Mekaymin Shel Zvachim, over there was no machlokes to kill Jews, but otherwise in everything. So we believe in discussion, and we will certainly have a very passionate discussion tonight. Before we start, I would like to say a little vart. This parsha, last parsha, we have the Mata Moshe, Asara Makis, the Mata Moshe. The Mata Moshe, the Gemara says, it was Nivra Yemash Shishi Bein Hashmoshes. Was one of the things, was something magical. It was created by Hashem Bein Hashmoshes. What's so magical about the Mata of Moshe? So here's something interesting. 5 times, Kaviyachol tries to get Moshe to go, step up, be the agent to redeem Klal Yisrael. And what does Moshe say? Mi Anochi, who am I? Ich bin garnished. Right? He was in the Vardika. Mi Anochi ki elech. The next time Hashem tries again, he tells him, so Moshe responds, Hein lo yaminu li. Nobody's going to trust me, believe in me. Lo yishmu b'kaili. The Rebbe Shalom tries again. He's a kvad peh, kvad loshin, aral sfasayim. 3 reasons. I'm very difficult to understand intellectually. That's kvad peh, kvad loshin, and my safa, the way my articulation is difficult, and kvad loshin, and I actually have a physical handicap. 3 reasons. And he says, shlach, the Kaviyachol comes again, shlach nabi atishla, send it. Moshe is anav mikaladim. He doesn't think he could do it. He doesn't think he's worthy. He doesn't think he's the appropriate messenger. So Rabbi Shalom says to him, Mazeh biyadcha. I mean, what Mazeh biyadcha? We both knew, everybody knew what he had in his hands. He says, Mateh. He says, Hashlichei arza. What's the question and what's the answer? Yes, he had a stick in his hand, just a stick. But he said, Mazeh biyadcha. Think of it. What is a shepherd? What is his staff? Yes, it's to walk. It could be to climb. But it could also be you could draw a picture with it on the ground, a direction. You could guide a sheep that's straying, you tap him. It could be a weapon. He thought he only had a matzah in his hand. No, he had a great power. He said, Ashlichei Arza became a monster. It's powerful, the matzah you have in your hand. The Rabbi Shalom was telling Moshe, you think you're powerless. You have a whole nation of slaves. You yourself, you're an anav. You don't know if you can, you can't. Mazeh biyadcha. What do you have? Unleash that power that you have in you. Awaken that power. And that mata becomes the symbol of Yetzias Mitzrayim. How many of us don't know what power? We don't know our story. What's your story? This Gary Apfel, he was a lawyer at Pfeffer Hamilton. He discovered a story. He found somebody who was 27. He says, that's my story. I'm giving up my job for that story. He found the mission, right? Now, here's something interesting. I heard this Torah from Yosef Yitzchak, the Dayan. He said like this. He said, I heard the word is like this. It says, you're not allowed to count Jews. But if you give a machzis hashekel, you could count the Jews. If you could give a tleh, like shoulders, you could count the Jews. What is it? So it's a joke. Don't count the Jew. Count the money he gave to tzedakah. Here's a very powerful word. If you count Jews, you're going to be very disappointed. There's really not a lot of Jews in the world. There's 0.2%. It's a tiny fraction. There are more Muslims born every 2 months than there are Jews in the world. The Jews are so small. There's like we're Batal. I mean, what are we? We're 2 out of 1,000. Batal b'shishim 10 times over 50. You're right. So if you count Jews, you're going to be very disappointed. But if you look at Jews' contribution, ze yitnu, it's astonishing. In chemistry, 20%, 30% of the U.S. total prize winners in chemistry. These are Nobel Prize. 33% of the U.S. total for literature, economics. 39% of the world's total of economics. 51 in medicine. 27% of the world's total by 2.02% of the world's population. That means we contribute 100 times, or in some of these cases, it's 200 times. In whatchamacallit, in economics, it's almost 200 times our weight. Right? It's like cayenne pepper. You don't want to put a lot of it into a soup, trust me, or salt or anything, right? And it's interesting. If you look at the world, the descent of Spain, when the golden era of Spain was when the Jews were there. When they evicted the Jews, they grabbed their money, they killed the metaphorical chicken, they killed the goose that laid the golden egg. Spain from 1500 descended 1550 till today. What do? It's a place where you could get they supply tomatoes for parts of southern Europe. What has come out of Spain? Nothing. Zilcho. From the great Spanish Armada, right? If you look, where did the Jews migrate to? Italy and Germany. Both became huge world powers. What happened when Germany started killing and expelling the Jews? The head scientist, Hitler, met the great mathematician who was leading the German, the University of Berlin. He said, "What's it like? What's math like in your university?" And he said to him, "There is no more math in our university. All the Jews have left." Right? So what has happened? Where the Jews have gone, innovation has followed, creativity, cures for diseases, economic prosperity, and when they left, it all left with them. The human capital. And where did it end up today? It ended up in the United States. And look at the flourishing of the United States the last 100 years since they've opened the doors to let the Jews in. So, if you look at a Jew at his size, well, not very big, with not a lot of us, if you look at the contribution, so what's the biggest mistake a person could make? Not recognizing the story that each one of us has, especially if you're a co-religionist, the power that we have. Look at history; it speaks for itself, right? So what does Hashem ask Moshe? Mazeh biyodcha? You know how you're going to redeem Klal Yisrael? Yeah, you think it's a nation of slaves. You think you're a miyanoichi shlachta biyatishtach. You're a kvad lashon. Mazeh biyodcha? What's the power you have? Don't look at your size. Don't look at your numbers. Look at how much you can influence the world. So what's the message to us? It says, B'chol dor v'dor. Everybody's supposed to see themselves as they left Mitzrayim. Well, you know where the beginning of Geula starts with? You know where the beginning of our Mitzarim, getting out of our problems? What could our problems be? They could be economical. They could be shidduch. They could be molestation. They could be relationship. You know where it all starts with? Hashem asks every one of us every year before, in these parshas, Mazeh biyodcha? Did you spend time realizing your story? And we've had on this program so many, from like Gary Apfel this week to people like Sander Gerber, who just stopped the terrorists, the PLO, Hamas from getting money. One person changed. We've had so many people who next week, the people who have the genetic testing. There's so many who do. 100 years ago, how many yeshivas were there in this country? Look around now. There's hundreds of choice. Mazeh biyodcha? We could fix whatever the problem is. You know what the beginning it is? Mazeh biyodcha. What's the power you have in your hand? So let's go to our wonderful line in our guest. We're going to start off with Birchas Hagomel. We have on the phone with us from Yerushalayim, Rabbi Yehoshua Pfeffer. He's a Rav in Ramot. He's also he's a Dayan. He was formerly on the Bezdin of Rabbi Weiss. Now he's on a private Bezdin. And he is he writes for the Institute of Dayanim in Yerushalayim. He is one of their writers. Welcome, Rabbi Pfeffer.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's a pleasure to be on.
So, Rabbi Pfeffer, I know you've written about Birchas Hagomel, so I'd like to ask you a few questions. For starters, the Shulchan Aruch says that, the Gemara says, Arba'at Shrichim L'Haides, one is a Yotzei Asirei Anu Yubarzel, somebody who left prison, right? So the question is, if somebody left prison, does it have to be for Dinei Nefashos? Does it have to be that his life is actually at risk, he's at B'sakana? Or is somebody who's in prison for Dinei Mamanis, can he also make a Birchas Hagomel? And I understand that the Magen Avram opines it needs Dinei Nefashos, the Bir Halacha Mishnah Berurah seems to them on that way. What is the consensus about Paiskim? Give us a little color.
All right, so it is a bit of an involved question. I'll try to give you the color as you mentioned. So yes, like you said, the basic ruling of the Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch, is that somebody who's in prison and comes out of prison makes a Birchas Hagomel. However, the basic assumption of the Gemara, as Rashi says and as the Poskim assume, is that there's an element of sakana, there's an element of danger involved in being in prison. And therefore, because you are relieved of that danger, you escape from that danger unharmed, so you make the Birchas Hagomel. So that's what really, that's the impulse, so that's the understanding behind the Magen Avram, who says that somebody who is only machmas nefashos, which the Bir Halacha understands to mean that there's no actual danger in his imprisonment, meaning the authorities want him for money, or either because of a monetary offense or for his money. There's slightly different ways of understanding this. But one way or the other, if he's not in actual physical danger, then he wouldn't make a Birchas Hagomel. But that isn't quite the end of the story, because there are a few other factors to I think that need to be put into the equation, and I'll be happy to mention them. So first of all, the Mishnah Berurah, the Bir Halacha, mentions that this could be contingent on a much broader discussion, which is basically a discussion between Poskei Sfard and Poskei Ashkenaz. It's already brought in the Torah and in the Shulchan Aruch. Now, the custom of Yotzei Sfard is to be more to be more broad, to have broader strokes in what enables or what is appropriate to make a Birchas Hagomel over. Even if there's only a slight danger, even if there's only a less of a possibility for a danger of life, so the custom of Sfard is still to make a Birchas Hagomel. That's why Sfardim make a Birchas Hagomel over journeys that Ashkenazim don't, from city to city. The Mishnah Berurah speaks about people who go on a boat on a river, not on the actual sea. Somebody who is sick, the Rambam Paskin, someone who is sick, even if it's not a dangerously ill disease, it's only a sickness that you're bedridden for a few days, still you'll make a Birchas Hagomel. And Mishnah Berurah says that the same thing could apply over here.
Okay, interruption, Rabbi Pfeffer. I just want to interrupt because you're referring to the Mechaber and Ratio Tes Zion. I have a question for you. So, do the Sfardim, if somebody gets the flu and they go to bed, they really make a Birchas Hagomel? Is that what? I'm an Ashkenazi, so I daven mostly in Ashkenazi shuls. Is that really so? You have the flu, you come back, you make a Birchas Hagomel, b'Shem Malchus. Is that the minhag?
Well, actually, yes. It doesn't have. You wouldn't make a Birchas Hagomel on a mild illness. Something that you have to go to bed for a couple of days, or. But if somebody is significantly ill,
Rabbi Pfeffer, if you would make from driving from city to city, which means if you drive from Lakewood to Lawrence, you make a Birchas Hagomel. Why wouldn't you make a Birchas Hagomel on the flu?
Well, that's really a nuanced question for the minhag Sfard. The question is really how far do you take this Birchas Hagomel that involves some element of danger? Because the flu, you can have complications from flu. They're pretty rare, and it's only if it's a serious flu, meaning you're in bed for a week, then perhaps you can start getting into issues of, because there's potential complications, you're bedridden. But the Poskei Sfard also agree that for an illness which is, you take a little bit of antibiotics and you get over it, you wouldn't make a Birchas Hagomel. And I think the basic distinction will be that still, a Birchas Hagomel, even according to the Mechaber, which is the Pesach Sfard, still requires something extraordinary. You don't make
Rabbi Pfeffer, when the Sfardim in Eretz Yisrael drive from Yerushalayim to Bnei Brak, they make a Birchas Hagomel?
So most of them don't. Even the Rabbi Yosef actually does say that it would be appropriate to make a Birchas Hagomel even over such a car journey from city to city, which is the opinion of the Mechaber. But the generally accepted minhag, even among Sfardim, is that for regular, everyday journeys, people drive every day to work from Yerushalayim to Bnei Brak. This is an everyday occurrence. It's like going from Brooklyn to Manhattan.
So from Haifa to Yerushalayim, they make a Birchas Hagomel?
No, from Tzfat to Eilat. A significant journey. A journey which is not an everyday journey. Anyway, so that also has implications for our prison case, because it's true that today prisons aren't directly dangerous. However, because you could come into contact with certain unseemly prisoners who might involve some element of danger, and because prison in and of itself can be a dangerous place, and if you fall out of line or do things out of order. So perhaps according to the Pesach Sfard, it's easier. It's easier to make Hagomel on prison sentences even today, according to Pesach Sfard. But let's leave the Pesach Sfard aside. As you said, you daven mainly with Ashkenazim, and I think even from the Ashkenazim perspective, which takes a more stringent line, a more narrow line in terms of where it's appropriate to make Hagomel, there's still a couple of considerations. You see, in the Rishonim, there are a number of poskim, a number of Rishonim and later poskim, who do mention that even machmas mamoin, even for imprisonment that doesn't seem to have a direct danger, danger of death, danger of capital punishment, still you would make a Birchas Hagomel. And there's two actual different, I would say, different lines of thought among the Rishonim, if you medayik them, of why this is so. So the Rabbi Yonah, which is brought by some of the poskim, Rabbi Yonah says that even in somebody machmas mamoin, he says there's still some element of sakana. He's explaining the order that the Gemara says them in, and he says the Beis HaSorim comes last, even in the pasuk it's not. But he says because ein sakana se kol kach, it's not such a danger. And he's speaking about Chavish Bavra Mamoin, somebody who's in prison because of monetary issues, and he says it's a lesser level of sakana. So according to Rabbi Yonah, it seems that you would still make a Hagomel for not like the Magen Avraham, but not because of a different, not because of a completely different line of reasoning, but just because there's still some element of danger. So then you would say, well, perhaps today in our prisons there just isn't any element of danger, and nobody's going to be put to death if you're there for some monetary offense. But the Ri Magash is something else. The Ri Magash, who's also brought he's brought in the Sharit Shiva, actually in Reshut Tes, of course. So the Ri Magash says that even somebody who is machmas mamoin, even for a monetary offense, you would still make a Hagomel, and this is interesting. He says because while he's in prison, he says lo haya moishel benafshay. The person wasn't in control of his own self. He was imprisoned. In prison, meaning he lost all semblance of freedom. Right? He didn't have any autonomy. Right? Lo haya moishel benafshay. And he says now he came out of that situation, and now he is in control of himself, and that itself is sufficient, according to the Ri Magash, to make the Hagomel. That's a chiddush, because this isn't the straight sakana, but the Ri Magash says that itself is sufficient for the Beis HaSurim, and that presents a new kind of horizon, a new option for the Birchas Hagomel on somebody who comes out of prison. It's interesting, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, when he says this machmas mamoin thing, as other poskim, the Aruch HaShulchan, by the way, says there's no difference, machmas mama and machmas nefashe, you make a hagomel. He puts it all together.
Well, but respectfully, Rabbi Pfeffer, respectfully, I think it's the Machzis HaShekel, asks on the Magen Avram, he says, didn't the Magen Avram see Rabbeinu Yaina?
Yeah, so the Machzis HaShekel actually resolves.
Right.
He resolves the Magen Avram with the Rabbeinu Yaina.
He says that, they used to catch Jews machmas mammon, and it was an excuse to torture them to death. And you see a similar concept, let's say, in Shin Peches and Choshen Mishpat. You see that a Meiser machmas mammon is considered a Meiser machmas nefashis. He says, and the Lashon of Yerushalayim
to another. Right.
Yeah, he says they catch a Jew, they want his money, and they figure out a way how to put him to death to get his money. So I think certainly we've seen enough in our history where money was an excuse to lead to life.
Right.
So if you go down that route,
are you insinuating that would be true today in the U.S.?
I don't think that would be true in a federal. I don't think they're trying to put people in prison to take their money away. It's not how the government works. So,
right. Meaning that's the way Machzis HaShekel understands.
Learns, yeah.
That it's not the pshat that they're doing it because of a monetary offense, but rather they're doing it to get your money. That's his kind of understanding.
And therefore they will kill you, and they will ultimately, it could lead to
right, and he resolves, right, and that's how he resolves the Magen Avram with the Rabbeinu Yaina. It's an interesting pshat that he has.
But the Rimigash that you quote, I have seen, I forgot in which of the Paiskim, I saw once, he said that the concept of,
brings it.
Yeah, that the concept of Moishel Banafshe, which is a strange concept, where does it say, like you quoted before, the Gemara says, Abot Sricha L'Haidis, Rashi says of it, like where is, so what does it have to do with Moishel Banafshe? And I have seen that the explanation of the Rimigash, and you tell me whether you think this is a stretch or not, is that when somebody is not Moishel Banafshe, so it means that they could get depressed, and depression itself could be very dangerous. Whereas when somebody loses their freedom, it leads to Marash Chayra. Marash Chayra, you see it already in the Paiskim, the Gemara and Brachas, they could have a din of Pikuach Nefesh if somebody gets, adequately depressed. And if that's the case, when somebody serves a lengthy sentence, it would certainly be where there's a concept of Moshe B'nafshe and where Marash Chayra, etc., certainly has to play a role where you say it would have a din of Pikuach Nefesh. What do you think about that way to read the Rimigash?
It would be interesting. The thing with your way of reading the Rimigash is that opens up some very broad halachic ramifications, because what you're saying is that the concern of imprisonment is in fact depression of some sort, and then depression itself is a concern for death eventually, meaning you're making a second step removed, and then you would say, well, if somebody imprisoned makes a hagomel because of the concern for depression, then kal v'chomer, somebody who is actually depressed would make a hagomel, right? So you would have a very interesting halachic nafkamina here. For example, for somebody who is depressed, and if you're saying that somebody who is depressed and then becomes healed, or his depression is healed and he's no longer depressed, he would make a hagomel. So the same would be true of other kind of conditions. How about some kind of an eating disorder? That would also be a ground for a hagomel. So I think it's an interesting line of thought. I think it's innovative. I would point out that Shulchan Aruch Harav, interestingly enough, when he says that you make a hagomel even on machmas mamoin, which is what he rules, he says, but only if the prisoner is put in chains, in azikim, he says, azikim, in chains. Meaning, which is it seems very strange. What have chains got to do with it?
He's getting it from the pasuk. That's where he's getting it from.
Well,
asirei anu barzel. So the pasuk they're in chains.
That's true. Meaning it's in the pasuk, but it's not in the halachic. The Gemara derives from the pasuk that somebody in Beis Hasurim makes a hagomel. Now, clearly, somebody who's in Beis Hasurim machmas nefashos would make a hagomel even without being in azikim. That's clear also from the Shulchan Aruch Harav. But he says, but if it's machmas mamoin, then with a tziruf, if he's also in azikim, then he would make a hagomel, which is a strange tziruf. either machmas mammon is sufficient for the Hagomel or not. So perhaps with the remigas, you can have some time, you can have some make sense of this, you can have some understanding of this, because the question is your freedom really completely being repressed? Have you lost all semblance? You don't have any control over your physical motions. You've lost all control over yourself, and I think that's the most simple understanding of the Rimigash. Putting in the depression is it's like an ukimta kind of, which is possible.
Yeah, but I'm trying to resolve, Rabbi Pfeffer, what I'm trying to resolve is the Lashon Rishonim in Haroya is that it's always kishayotzim in asakana. Taisva says, we list the orders hamasuka and yoser. So the Moshel Benafshay does not rise to the level of sakana. So where does he get this new element, this chiddush?
Well, first of all, the Gemara itself doesn't say sakana, right? The Gemara says that there are Birchas Tzrichim Lehoidis. It's true that Rashi and it's not just Rashi. It's true that the Rishonim in general. Yeah, the Rashi and Tosfos and the other Rishonim, meaning even the Rishonim Sarad, for instance, when they speak about journeying from city to city, then they're very careful to point out, because there's a Yerushalayim that says Kol hadrachim ar becheskas sakana. Any kind of a journey has some element of danger. So it's true that sakana is a basic, very basic theme in the sugya. But I think the simple understanding of the Rimigash is that losing your basic liberty, losing your most fundamental freedom, right? Think about the Shulchan Aruch Harav, which speaks about being in chains, right? A prisoner who is in chains. He's lost everything. He doesn't have, the Les Miserables, the prisoner who's lost everything. So a prisoner like that is it's true he's not necessarily in danger of imminent death, but he's lost his life for all intents and purposes. Meaning, it's true that he's not physically dead, but like the Gemara says that ani chashav kameis. So this is much worse than an ani. He's lost everything. He doesn't have a life. It's an extension. It's a stretch, but it's a stretch which we can strongly identify with. Although you're right, this isn't the strict sakana that the other Rishonim seem to be.
So Rabbi Pfeffer, how would you, bottom line, what would you say? Somebody who's ushered today machmas mammon in a U.S. jail, what would you paskin?
Well, that's a good question. Let me say the following. In general, we're quite careful with Safek brachas lahafel. When there's a Safek, we're worried about bracha levatala, and therefore, in many instances, even in Birchas Hagomel, we find poskim saying Safek brachas lahakel. Even many poskim say this even about flights. That Safek brachas and so on. But this is a little bit like the slippery slope idea. That slopes have two sides to them, and on the one side you have the Safek brachas lahakel, but on the other side you have this idea of making brachas. Making brachas brings in HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the significant events, the significant things that we do in our lives, whether it's everyday things like eating, or whether it's special events like when we make Shechiyanu. And I do find it a little bit difficult, even after, to prevent somebody who's coming out of prison, who's been there for years, let's say, it's not a 2-day, jail sentence, but it's a real prison sentence for a few years, and then he's coming out. It's such an incredible, significant event. It's difficult to say. Perhaps this is a bit too emotional to get into strict halacha, and perhaps you can also make a hatov v'ametiv, just because of the joy of being released. So, you can make a bracha anyway. But because we have these poskim, we have the Aruch HaShulchan, we have the Shulchan Aruch Harav, although he speaks about being in chains, so I don't think we're so much in chains today. It would depend on the hardship, I guess, of the prison sentence. And we have many other Acharonim.
I mean, you have the great Eliyahu Rabbah. I mean,
we have the Eliyahu Rabbah, right? We have many Acharonim.
It's allowed. So
right,
let me
we have
follow up
many who do permit it. So I would lean towards saying that.
Rabbi Pfeffer, so let me follow this up with a question. You would permit it. The Shulchan Aruch quite famously, or maybe infamously, paskins that somebody else who's very close or feels a tremendous kinship or is also delighted with that person who basically makes the gaimel. The stranger, or rather this friend, or this person who has that kinship, could also make a gaimel. And he makes a little different. He says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu asher gmolcha kol tov. So in a case where you have a prisoner who has many people who are jubilant and excited and happy about his release, can they make a gaimel as well? And which is the opinion of both the Beis Yosef and the Ramot, even though there are poskim who disagree. But would you say in this case, let them all make a gaimel?
Right. So first of all, interesting question. Second, a couple of things. So first of all, the kind of drive that we have, right, the impetus to allow the person coming out of prison himself to make the Hagomel, right, and to be lenient with Aruch Shulchan and Eliyahu Rabbah and the other poskim who are lenient on this. We wouldn't have that so much for everybody else. I mean, we don't have a halachic will, if you want, or we don't. There's less of a need, as it were, to be making on this for others. But beyond that, the actual application for which traditionally, I'm just saying, how does Klal Yisrael apply this ruling of other people making Hagomel for somebody very close, somebody that you have a close relationship or kinship with, is very, very limited. We find it in very exceptional cases. For example, husband and wife here and there, we find it that a person can mention the Malech, then we would say Kol Tov, Sheg Malech Kol Tov, and other very limited applications. It's something which is generally absent from Sifrei HaPoskim and also generally absent from everyday custom, from everyday mimic. Even
though the case in the Gemara in Haroah, which I forgot his name, of something Bagadata from Baghdad, is where basically a friend came up, saw that his friend who he thought was very ill got better, and he made the bracha. So you do see that the Makayr is where I forgot his first name, the Tanner, Yitzchak Bagadata. So you see that it is used for, it is, for friends, not just for husband and wife. This was a case of friendship.
Meaning we do find a precedent for it. I'm just pointing out that the general
not commonly done.
It's not commonly done. So I would be, but I have another point that I would also add on to that, and that is that we have to be a little bit careful, I would say, about this kinship idea. Meaning, perhaps we're all very happy that somebody comes out of prison, and I'm assuming you're referring to the Rubashkin, the recent Rubashkin affair. So everyone's very happy. There's a kind of Didon Notzach atmosphere. And there's a lot to speak about that also. I don't know if this is germane to the discussion, but in any case, that we have to distinguish between that joy at seeing somebody released from prison and between this very intimate kinship and this, of husband-wife or very, very close relationship that would enable the bracha that you're referring to.
What is your opinion about the Didon Natzach? We're going off the halacha for a minute, but I am curious.
Well, do you want to be a bit more specific about the question?
Yeah, so you mentioned it. You said that there is an attitude of Didon Natzach, and it's worth discussing. So I'm just following that with the question.
Well, again, I just think it's. There is something nuanced here, and the nuance is that on the one hand, of course, we're very, very happy that somebody has come out of prison, and I think that's absolutely legitimate to be joyful that somebody's come out of prison. At the same time, one has to be wary of presenting the right message to young people that, and I would have expected, would have hoped that the message would be broadcast, that we're very happy that somebody's come out of prison. One has to be very careful to avoid the kind of actions that put you into prison in the first place. And with all the joy of coming out, it would have been far, far, far more joyful and far, far better had he not gone in the first place.
So let me follow up, since I have you, let me follow up with a question that bothers me.
And then just by the way, before you follow up, there's an interesting question that could be asked also on the Hagomel perspective. And this is mentioned by some of the poskim. Tzitz Eliezer speaks about this somewhere. What happens when somebody places himself in danger, meaning he does something wrong and he's put into jail because of something wrong that he did? Do you make Hagomel even though it's evidently your fault? You know, you're in prison not because they made something up and put you there on false charges, but they put you there on true charges. So that's also a discussion. But my opinion.
Respectfully, I haven't seen the Tzitz Eliezer, but respectfully, I would say that it says Arba Tzrichen L'Haides, somebody who went down to the ocean. Now, let's say somebody he went into a ship because he was a tourist. He wanted to see the Pantheon.
I agree. I think that's a good raya. I agree with you.
Would you say he doesn't make a Hagomel? Or somebody who crossed the desert to go to his cousin's bar mitzvah, would you say he doesn't mention Hagomel? Or somebody who's maybe a chayla because they were outside and they caught a cold and they weren't wearing a coat. Is it brought any place in the Paiskim that they don't bring a Hagomel? So I find this concept very.
I agree with you. I agree with you, and that's also what the Tzitz Eliezer decides. Even if he brings from, I think, the Machzik Bracha or from some other authority that says not like that. But however, there would be interesting cases, borderline cases. For example, somebody who goes bungee jumping, okay, or something really dangerous, but he does it, because he wants the thrill of the danger, and then he actually survives. Would he make a Hagomel on that? And then I would probably say no, because if you're actually looking for the danger, it's the danger that you want, and then you're saved from that danger. Then I think it stands to reason that you wouldn't make a Hagomel on that.
I think somebody who attempted suicide, that would be the question. Does he make a Hagomel or not? But let me follow this up with a much more relevant question. I noticed something in the news a week ago that 2017 was the safest year ever for air travel. That there were 1.5 billion or so, some very, very large number of passenger flights, and there wasn't a single accident, right? And in general, the accident level for flying is in commercial aircraft, that is very minimal. It's 1 in 16 million, I believe. Juxtapose that with car accidents, where 1.25 million, that's 1.25 million people died in the last year from car accidents. Now, given that the Gemara, like we said, it says, and you had, it's the safest mode of travel that there is, period. Like I heard one person say, he says, by far the most dangerous thing about air travel is the drive to the airport. Right? You had over 1 million people die in car accidents, and maybe 1 million different car accidents. We're at 0 flights. Hasn't benching Hagomel become a little bit of a comedy? I mean, you have a person, he flies to Eretz Yisroel for a simcha, and they're eating first-class food or second-class food. If there was any element of danger, let's face it, would a person take his whole family together on an airplane? Of course not. It's absurd. And the statistics say it's absurd. So to me, I was actually in shul where somebody made a Birchas Hagomel, and the guy next to me said very out loud, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusay Leilam Vod. Like the Ramot in Hilchos Tefillin, right? So are we at a point where we're making, we're talking about, does you need pikuach nefesh? By going to jail, the Mishnah Berurah says it has to be dafka, somebody machmas nefashis. By a chayli, it has to be a makas chalal, where the person's life is in danger. And now we have a guy, he's flying to Eretz Yisrael, for a bar mitzvah, to stay at some fancy hotel, or not, and he's making a Hagomel. We're making a litzanis out of Hagomel, aren't we?
Well, let me make a couple of points on that. First of all, I mean, you're asking on flights, but you can ask the very same question about a cruise, right? About a cruise on a boat.
And I think it would be. I think if the statistics say, and I don't know the statistics, that a cruise was so safe, even though from what I understand, a lot of people get food poisoning. They may have to make a different bracha. But if indeed, it was so safe, etc., then it would be the same question.
Right. Because most poskim, many poskim equate. Many poskim equate flights. It's also considered Yordei Hayam. Rav Moshe says that's not the case. Rav Moshe says even an inland flight, right, a flight from New York to Chicago, it would also make a Hagomel.
Now I'm aware of the tshuva of Rav Moshe. However, it's possible.
Right. And by the way, he starts off the tshuva. That tshuva, Rav Moshe starts off by saying that flights have an inherent sakana. That's
right,
but
he also says in the same tshuva, he says, if it would be absolutely not dangerous, he writes that in the tshuva, you would not make a bracha. So I say that given the statistics that you have, most people think car driving isn't dangerous. You had 1.25 million people die by death in cars and 0 in planes. Yes, it's over 1 billion and plus flights. So yes, it says that it has reached a level where it's not even a miyat of a miyat of a miyat. It's bottled tens of millions, and therefore, based on that, it reached that level that even Rav Moshe says should not be a bracha, and it becomes a bracha levatala.
Right. So I would make the following point, which is a general point about how halacha works, because this really isn't a question about Birchas and Hagomel. It's a question about halacha in general. You could say it's a question on philosophy of halacha, or a question of how halacha works. And you can make the same case against making a shechiyanu on a new fruit. In the U.S. or anywhere in the world, basically, you have seasonal fruit the whole year round. They import them from goodness knows where, and still we're making shechiyanu on new fruits. When they come around, even though most people don't feel any great joy at eating the oranges when they whatever it is, and still we make those shechiyanu brachos, and the same idea will apply over here, in that since Chazal derived from Psukim, and it's not an enactment of Chazal, but Chazal will cover, right? Chazal said that these are the things that you make the bracha on. So there's a certain, you would say, conservatism, a certain traditionalism about the way halacha works, that you don't say, well, because today things are different, so we're gonna cancel these brachas. Think about, for example, Dayan, right? Would you say that because stainless steel is not belair because our stainless steel is much more?
Respectfully, let me respond to those points, okay? I would say like this, that first of all, if you were a Rav 100 years ago and somebody had strep throat and they came to you, should they make a Birchas Hagomel? If I were the Rav, and I'm not a Rav, I would say 100%. I know somebody who didn't take antibiotics for strep throat, and they almost died from it, and they needed to have major surgeries too. I don't want to, say, but this person sometimes listens. But my point is, they almost died from that. Right? Today, if somebody came to you and they said, I had strep throat and I took penicillin, should I make a Birchas Hagomel? You would of course say no. So what is a sakana and what isn't a sakana clearly could change. Now, in the case of the stainless steel pots that you're talking about, that you're saying, even though it's, the poskim do use it as a sniff a heter, or Shloim Zalman, etc., it is used by poskim because there are no blias, based on. But over there, the point is, from making the chumrah, nothing comes. There's nothing wrong. Adarab, we have a minig. There are many minhagim today. I think everybody would tell you that there's no danger eating fish and meat together. All the Goyish restaurants have surf and turf. They serve, and they're not dying in droves, right? So what is it? It became a minig Yisroel that's what we do. But here, on the other hand, you have a shaila of making a bracha b'shem u'malchus, right? So you're taking a chumrah, and because of that chumrah being nichnas into a suffix, depends according to which poskim, of a deraisa of Moitzi Shem Levatol, Sisa Shem Ashav, right? Not like the Magen Avram, but like many other poskim.
Well, first of all, okay, but you have to remember.
I'm just saying. So here's a chumrah where there's no damage. Here there's a chumrah where there's a real problem because of it.
Right, but you have to remember that according to many poskim, and this is a question which we don't have to get into now, but the question of whether you make a bracha on the minhag, on minhagim, and this is clearly a minhag, right? Making a bracha on the minhag. You know, and
you're
again,
saying it's like halal. You're saying it would be like halal, where you're making a bracha als minhag. I understand,
that's one possibility. But the other thing,
but I think there's a differentiator there. Okay, go ahead.
David, the other thing with David is that, by contrast with the strep throat, which is something which changes, you know, over the years, and from one century to the next, we've had a revolution in medical science and in everything, and of course, brachas will change accordingly. These four basic categories, right? Yordei Hayam and Asurim and Chulish and Israfi and so on. These basic categories are things that Chazal derived from Psukim. Now,
but look at the pasuk. But Rabbi Pfeffer, look at the pasuk. It says, "Hey maro maseh Hashem, Yerdi am b'niyas, Oisem lachem b'nayim, Hey maro maseh." They saw the miracles of Hashem that they were saved. Well, nobody who's taking a cruise with Carnival Cruises is going to say, "Hey maro maseh Hashem," and nobody who's taking El Al with their family to stay in a hotel is going to say, "Hey maro maseh Hashem." The very same pasuk I'm pointing out, right?
Right, but it's worth mentioning that the Rav Moshe has a very interesting deher. He has a very interesting line of thought over here in his tshuva. Rather than just going with sakana, which is one possibility, he doesn't do that. He actually goes in a slightly different direction, and he says, what's the fundamental idea of the Hagomel about a boat? The idea is that without the boat, you're dead, because without a boat, you're drowning in the water. So the boat is saving you. Right, every second you're kind of in danger in a kind of in an inherent way, in an existential way. Would you make a bracha
then if you went over a bridge? Because if the bridge wasn't there, you would die.
No, because the bridge is part of land. The bridge is part of land. The sea, you know, that gets into the Gemara there with the ego is up there. Let's not go there. But I think it's an interesting way of thinking. He says kal v'chomer about an airplane, that, you know, were it not for the airplane, you're in mid-air. You know, you're 10,000 feet up in the air. Were it not for the airplane, you're instantly dead. And so the airplane, as it were, is keeping you alive, and that itself is ground. And it's a creative and interpretive way. He's not addressing your question, of course. He's addressing a slightly different question. But it's an interpretive. It's a creative way of thinking of how, you know, we take the halachas that we have, and you know, because, you know, you can give sociological reasons, you can give, religious reasons, or whichever reasons you want. We'll probably carry on making Birchas Hagomel after going on cruises and so on, because, you know, the daily place can have this responsibility to maintain the halacha and not to change it in drastic ways. So we'll probably carry on doing it. And this is a nice idea of giving it a kind of new interpretation, as it were, which I don't think anybody said this before of Moshe. I don't know anybody. But it gives it a kind of new meaning that could be applicable even today. True, not quite in the same sense as perhaps it was understood previously, but still in a sense that gives us more of a ta'am and more of an understanding of how the bracha can be made, in spite of your very, I think, on the point objections in saying. And by the way, there are plenty of people who do make Hagomel on flights, but not quite for your reason. They just say that flights is different from boats. But let's speak about boats, right? Somebody who makes a cruise, who crosses the Atlantic on a boat, which I think is very, very, again, definitely less risky than driving a car. And still, people are going to carry on making a Hagomel on that for, you know, the next, I don't know how long.
Well, Rabbi Pfeffer, thank you very much for your time and most interesting Divrei Torah.
Thank you very much. All the very best.
Bye-bye.
We have on the phone with us Rabbi Gabriel Bechoffer from Monsey, New York, who's a noted Rebbe, Mechadach, author. Welcome, Rabbi Bechoffer.
Thank you very much.
Rabbi Bechoffer, tell me, we've had various letters from people who are concerned that the partying, that the singers, etc., they're making big asifis, the celebrations for Rubashkin. There are people who are concerned about it. Could you express to our audience what your concern is?
Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, I think everybody should be happy that Shalom Mordechai Rubashkin was released. It is a chesed of whoever is responsible for it that it happened, and for that. On the other hand,
and additionally, Rabbi Bechoffer, would you agree that the sentence was way excessive? It was a miscarriage of justice and a pogrom in a way, like a mini pogrom?
The first two, yes. The third thing, no. I would be very careful using the word pogrom. I think that it's misapplied in this case. Yes, certainly was a miscarriage of justice. Obviously, many great lawyers and political figures took that position, and obviously they know what they're talking about. And therefore, it should have certainly been a shorter sentence. But I would never call this a pogrom under any circumstance. And I'm not sure that such language is not inflammatory to a certain extent.
Okay, so what is your concern then?
There are two concerns. The concern is primarily the Garutz Ba'umos. In other words, we know that this is Sat Mashita because of the Sholosh Shvuos concerning Eretz Yisrael, and most of us do not feel that it's applicable to Eretz Yisrael for various different reasons, but it certainly is applicable to Chutz La'aretz, where we are, and but people see that the Orthodox Jews make a great simcha over the release of somebody that they do not understand the miscarriage of justice involved. As far as they're concerned, he is a convicted criminal based on the American system. They tend to find this very strange, and they tend to see this as celebrating criminals, which is certainly not the impression we want to leave with them. And again, I think that these Garas Fumos, it's bucking the system. It comes across as if we don't respect the system of law in America, which is a very big Chil Hashem.
Okay. Do you have any other concerns?
Yes. The other concern is a more general one for the moment, which is that there is a basic understanding, I think, which I've come across in many of my students, that the anti-Semitism which exists in the world is inherent in the non-Jewish personality, and that it comes from Halacha b'Yadua Esav Seinel Yaakov. And I feel that this is a misconception of Esav Seinel Yaakov. First of all, we don't find, I believe, till the Abarbanel, anybody who understood that this applies to anybody other than Yaakov and Esav themselves. There's even a question of whether the word halacha is a tos atfus, it should be ha b'yadua, and the application of it to all non-Jews, and to say that any Yehudi has an antipathy and for a Yehudi is something which is very wrong and underlies a lot of, I think, the inappropriate attitude towards the secular authorities and, in general, other people and other cultures. I want to add something, if I may, which is that many years ago, I wanted to publish in a certain periodical this is a third concern. I want to publish a certain periodical, I don't want to name it, a letter about racism in the Orthodox community, which was and probably is still a problem. This went to the editorial board, and they were done. They back and forth. Is this a good idea? Not a good idea? And one of the members of the editorial board called me, and he said he's not going to publish the letter. And he said, why? He says because he doesn't believe that we should publish letters or any articles about issues which are washing, so to speak, our dirty laundry in public if they're not going to be a toelis, if they're not going to be advantageous or correct the situation. And then he went further. And he said that's why he doesn't allow this periodical to publish articles about choshen mishpat, about monetary matters and dealing dishonestly with the authorities, with the government, and so on and so forth. He says even though he certainly does not condone such behavior and such activity, nevertheless, he understands where it's coming from, the approach in Europe before the war, as a result of the war, and he doesn't think it's going to change, and therefore it's not worth writing about and bringing it up in public. So I think it's important for us to, on the contrary, understand that and discuss that the nature and notion of anti-Semitism, especially in what we call a Medina Shel Chesed, and not to have this assumption that everybody's out to get us, because it actually breeds bad midos and also a certain hisnatzchus, a certain sense of victory when we, so to speak, overcome the other side.
So, Rabbi Bechoffer, let me share with you that there's something not accepted, but it's Yerushalayim. It's in Perek Tes of the Durham. I don't remember what halacha it is. Maybe halacha Vav or Dayan. So the Yerushalayim says that there's a machlokes, Rabbi Akiva, and I think it's Ben Zayba. The Yerushalayim says Rabbi Akiva says Zek klal gadol b'Torah v'hafta l'reacha kamaycha.
Right. Ben Azai.
The Gemara says. So Ben Azai says Yeshli klal gadol mizeh. What?
Right.
No,
that's
Adam. So what does the Pnei Moshe say on the spot? He says, because the end of the pasuk is Kibitzela b'leikib asas Adam. So he says, Rabbi Akiva is saying, V'hafta l'reyecha kamoicha. You have to love reyecha, right? And Ben Azai is saying, no, Bitzela b'leikim asas Adam, which goes on to Ben Noach too, is also, he says, Bitzela b'leikim asas Adam, but every Ben Noach is Bitzela b'leikim. So Yeshli Gadol Mizeh, he's saying that there's a din of ahava, even to a guy, certainly a respect, and he's a Tzela B'Leikim, and this is a Gemara that is not oft quoted among the people I know.
Right. It's not where it's rarely quoted. You said.
It's rarely quoted.
Rarely quoted. I want to. You're 100%, and I want to add a couple of things to what you said. First of all, another Yerushalayim with which I'm sure you're familiar. Yerushalayim happens to be chaviv on me. I don't know if your listeners are aware that I have the entire Yerushalayim shurim, 750 shurim online for free download. Anybody wants to learn Yerushalayim, people have done it with me. So Yerushalayim in Bamitzia about Rabbi Shimon ben Shetach. Rabbi Shimon ben Shetach, his Talmidim, as I said, I'm sure you're familiar with it. His Talmidim brought him a donkey, and in the donkey's, so that he would be able to make a living from that. And in the donkey's backpack, there was a precious stone. And the Talmud said, look, you won't have to work anymore for the rest of your life. And the Shimon Shetach said, did the guy who sold it to you know that it was there? He said, no, he doesn't know, but whatever, there are heterium for such things. So,
Shimon Shetach.
Right. But Turkey said, you think I'm a barbarian? Barbarian? No, he would give all kesef azad shav'olam, like you said, that we should say Baruch Elokei Shimon ben Shetach. And this really is supposed to be our goal and our mission in this world. And if we're doing something which can cause a misunderstanding that not Baruch Elokei Shimon ben Shetach, then we're going against our entire purpose and mission why we're here in this world. I want to add something else quickly, which is that I have a personal hero, Rabbi Abram Kaplan's Zatzal, the big for Yira. He has an article of a mimer in his sefer on the sefer to put out on Shas on the getter of an Enoch, and he makes the point which you said before about loving Kol Adam B'Asher Hu Adam, and he says that much of the halachas which we find in and the attitude which we find in Chazal was specifically towards umot of the Avodah Zarah. It does not refer to Noitrim and Muslimim. It does refer to them because they have halacha of Bnei Noach, and since they have halacha of Bnei Noach, therefore these things do not apply to them. He says maybe even they have a status of Ger Tosha, which of course is not knowing, but one of that.
This is the Miri. This is the sheet of the Miri in many places. Yeah.
Right. It's in Mir and Baba Kavod Aflam B'Ches. Right. Yes.
Yeah. It's not in the Skabel. I mean, the halacha to me, I haven't seen anybody who ever uses the Miri halacha, but it's a nice sheet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, but I don't know.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure whether we're talking about halacha, strict letter of the law here. We're talking about listening to Shur Sadin. I think we're talking about what the Mesilas says called Kobas or Adam Bolamo, which goes beyond the strict letter of the law.
And Rabbi Bechoffer, and you believe that teaching an attitude of disrespect towards the B'nai Noach leads to bad things. That's what you believe.
Absolutely. Correct, yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Bechoffer, for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
We have on the phone with us from New York, Rabbi Yaakov Horowitz, who's the founder of Yeshiva Darchei Noam. He's also the founder of Project Yes, the Chaber of many Svarim. Welcome, Rabbi Horowitz.
Hi, David. Always a pleasure.
Rabbi Horowitz, as a mechanech par excellence, how do you explain to children what is going on right now in our community in Shalom Mordechai Rubashkin?
Well, I think there are a number of of beautiful things about this whole incident with from the time of his original arrest throughout the sentencing and then the campaign to try to release him early. I mean, full disclosure, my dear friend and Gary Apfel of Los Angeles devoted years of his life, literally pro bono, money out of his pocket. I've rarely seen such devotion, day and night, to help secure his release, and I'm very proud of his efforts. And I think it's really beautiful. I mean, so the nice things are the fact that so many people care, that so many people around the world really felt a sort of a personal connection to this. I'm not an attorney, and I did not follow the case closely enough to really make an informed opinion, but I think it's pretty clear that the sentence was the time of the the amount, whatever, 27 years or so, was extremely excessive. There were a lot of problems brought up in the case. I mean, the fact that 100 people, elected officials from both parties, signed the commutation request really tells you that they really felt an injustice was done. It doesn't just say, release him. It says release him because of, and everybody signed their name to that. So I think the fact that a husband is home with his wife and father is home with their children is something to be happy for, very happy for. And I think it's beautiful, the level of connection, the fact that so many people were praying and davening for him and really emotionally involved in it. I was unsettled by the public celebrations. I felt it was inappropriate to in this age of 24-hour media and one smartphone gets everything online. I just didn't think it was wise, and I do have a public voice on social media. I did call people who are very high up in Askanas in public life, representing our community before the government, and they were very unsettled by it as well. I'm talking top people. I asked people who were involved in this case and who regularly interact with government officials, regardless of how we feel about it. He in the public eye, he's a convicted felon, and I just felt that those public celebrations were really were not what our community needs.
Okay, and as far as him going to schools and giving out candy, etc., what's your feeling about that?
Well, I was, I stepped down from my yeshiva a few years ago, so I was not, I'm not directly interacting with children on that level now. But when he was sent to prison, and children did ask me about it, and making me shavuos for him. So I did say in every conversation that I had with the children, I did say that he committed crimes, and to put at least some context in the conversation, which I think is important. He's not Rav Shimon Bar Yochai coming out of a cave. where he spent 12 years learning. I don't think that he should be glorified as a hero. I think it's beautiful that thousands of people felt connected enough to celebrate for him. I really think that's beautiful. I think there needs to be some context here, and I think in some of the written reports, it really, I don't think it was presented fully that way, that here's a man who made mistakes and did things wrong, and, the punishment was over the top, and we're delighted to have him home. I must tell you that, for my Gary, he most people our age, David, don't impress that easily. And he was extraordinarily impressed with his faith, with some Rubashkin, his faith, with the grace in which he took everything. He certainly has a lot of great qualities to him, but I think it needs to be put in context.
You think this is not the Alter Rebbe coming out of jail, or the Tana who went to jail because he had tefillin in his hand, or Rebbe Kiva was teaching Torah during exams.
Right. That's what I meant about Rabbi Yochai coming out of the cave. That's what I meant. I mean, and especially in Chabad, for example, where the many years, the majority, a great deal of the time of the Hasidus existed, they were either on the communist rule, and before that under a very anti-Semitic regime, and they were celebrations, people going into prison, tzaddikim, the Rebbe, the Balatanya, and a great celebration upon his release. And I am concerned about that message, the message that celebrating someone's release, even early release from prison, can convey to children that the system is rigged against us as Orthodox Jews, and therefore we're not going to get a fair shake, and therefore the rules, it weakens the faith that as a country our children should be having in the rule of law. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, I've been very outspoken that President Trump has been weakening the respect for the rule of law. Every time he tweets about it, I'm consistent in my thinking. I think it's just beyond horrible that the leader of our country is demonstrating a lack of faith and publicly talking about lack of faith in his own Justice Department. So all of these things.
The purpose of dinim, you're saying that the purpose of dinim, like Rishonim says, that without it, Ishus Riyeyu Kayim Belay. Right. And rules are important to have a functioning society.
Right. Traffic lights are important. Traffic lights are important. Right. And there's a lot of research. There's a lot of research in the general population about, when people have a code of practice or a set of rules themselves, it's often, and then you introduce another set of rules. It's all in the minds of people, which set of rules govern. And in our situation, because our beautiful yeshiva system on the side tends to have paramount respect for the rule of the Torah, the halacha, what we call halacha, in this great country where it's pretty clear that it's the best we've ever had it in 2,000 years, and people do have the ability to go into any profession they want and to feel safe and practice religion as we wish to. We should be teaching our children a sense of civic pride and a sense of pride in our government and respect for the rule of law. And when it's presented in a one-sided way like this, like these bad people wanted to lock this man up forever, and now we're celebrating, again, the statement should be made that in this case, it was excessive. This bleeds over to other areas like for example, the whole issue of child safety and reporting to the authorities. And if you tend to believe that the system is rigged and you can't get a fair shake and an Orthodox Jew can't, which I don't believe to be true, but if this message is conveyed in many different ways, it undermines what's just a fundamentally important concept of the rule of law.
Rabbi Horowitz, thank you very much for your time.
Always a pleasure, David, anytime.
Okay, bye-bye. We have the honor of having with us on the phone Gary Apfel, who is an attorney based in Los Angeles. He works for a very prestigious firm, Pfeffer Hamilton, and he has for the last 4.5 years been working pro bono for Shalom Rubashkin, and gave that very poignant and moving speech that I think most of us saw about how he heard that Rubashkin was going to be freed. Welcome, I'm Gary.
Thank you very much, David. It's a great pleasure to be speaking to you.
So as a matter of background, did you grow up in New York or LA? Where did you go to Yeshiva? I mean, did you just to give us a little bit of perspective?
Sure. I grew up on the west side of Manhattan. My father, Shalom, was born in Vienna and moved to America during World War II. And my mother, Yisroel, was born in Berlin, also moved during World War II. And we grew up on the west side. And as I'm so proud to say, my father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather were close with Kapitchenites from Vienna. And Baruch Hashem, I'm thrilled that my children are now fifth generation that are close with Kapitchenites, which is the major influence in my life are my father and the Kapitchenitz Rebbes. And about 35 years ago, I moved to California when my wife, who was from California, said she'd like to move back to LA.
So just as a matter of the Kapitchenitz Rebbe was my sandik.
No. Oh, I don't believe it.
Yes. And I'll tell you something else. My father's sandik as well. And I think my father said I'm the only person he knows who the Kapitchenitz Rebbe was a father and a son, both his sandik.
Unbelievable. He was my sandik too, and he put my tefillin on my bar mitzvah. You know, that's amazing. David, I hope that I'll get the chance to meet you in person because I love meeting people who became Jews in the hands of the Kapitchenitz Rebbe.
Well, there you go.
Wow.
So Gary, we had two Rabbanim who we interviewed who both expressed the following concern, or they each actually expressed different concerns. But one of them expressed a concern. He said, in our community, I shouldn't say our, but in a lot of the from a community, there's a suspicion of the greater law system as a whole, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that in Europe, we were targets. There was state-sponsored anti-Semitism, and in Poland, there were 160 different jobs that a Jew was not allowed to do, include things like owning land, etc. This is as of law, judicially not allowed to do. So there's a lot of suspicion, and Jews had to do things like smuggling. I mean, there was no other way for them to earn a livelihood. There was a state-sponsored effort to drive them beyond into poverty, but actually into like hunger. And there's a residual of that. So when we have somebody who is arrested, and yes, there was a sentence that was all agree was, well, at least most of the people I speak to say was a breakdown of the justice system, or maybe Linda Reed may be a closet anti-Semite, et cetera, et cetera. But the man is a convicted felon, and now we're dancing and making the Sebis and we're basically reinforcing to our children, the Goyim are out to get us, the judicial system isn't honest. With the blowover being is, if they're out to get us, then we don't have to treat them so well. We can roll back the odometers on there's a shul near where I live where half the shul is in and out of jail at any time because the Rebbe in this shul speaks to Goyim, they're out to get us, they're the Sainim, the Esav Sainili, Yankev. And when you just listen to this and listen to this and listen to this means I can cheat you. I can steal from you. So this Rav was saying, it's reinforcing this in our community that, okay, yes, there was an anti-Semitic thing, but all the jubilation and the victory laps is reinforcing this. This is what one of the Rabbanim we had on, and I'm curious if you could respond to that.
That's a very long question. You made a lot of different points in that question, and if I'm permitted, I'd like to try to give you an appropriate, responsive, long answer and try to address all the things that you mentioned in the question, if that's okay.
Sure. You have the microphone.
First of all, I must say, first of all, that when you were mentioning about Poland and the restrictions, et cetera, unfortunately, there are restrictions like that in the United States as well. I live in Hancock Park in California, and I will show you the deed to my house. And the deed to my house says no Negroes, no Mexicans, and no Jews may live in this house except in the servants' quarters. So unfortunately, it exists in the United States as well. America is a land of laws, but unfortunately, at times, the laws are only as good as the people that apply them. What gives us hope? What gives us hope is this case, because so many non-Jewish senior, former, prominent members of the judicial system, including every living former attorney general prior to the Obama administration, multiple deputy attorneys general, federal judges, state judges, U.S. attorneys, all the outpouring and the outcry that they all had in this case should solidify the fact that even though, yes, there are people, Yosef son of Yaakov, and there are people out there that still are anti-Semites today, unfortunately that's a fact, but this country is run and administered by people who aren't that way. Certainly nothing that may have happened or happens against Jews ever justifies a Jew breaking the law. And I'm not a Rav, so I'm not going to say Dina de Malchusa Dina. It's just not the proper thing to do. We're Yidden. We have to set an example for the world. That's why we're here. And first and foremost, it starts with obeying the laws and behaving like proper citizens with good midos in every way, including obviously obeying the law. So that's certainly not, in my opinion, I don't know who this Rav was that you were mentioning, but that's not appropriate or justified. In terms of the celebrations, let me start by saying this. As Shalom Mordechai Rubashkin's attorney, who I think it's fair to say is intensively familiar with all the details of this case, I share Alan Dershowitz's view that had Shalom gotten a fair trial, he would have been acquitted. So I think in part the celebrations are the fact that a man that was wrongfully convicted, because you said he's a convicted felon. Well, yes, that's true that technically in the Northern District of Iowa, based on the tactics, the egregious misconduct tactics that were engaged in by these prosecutors, and that's not my words, that's the words that were in a letter signed by 107 former senior Justice Department officials to the then U.S. Attorney in Northern District of Iowa, which was reinforced in a meeting that I had the privilege of attending with 3 former Deputy Attorneys General who were outraged by the conduct of these prosecutors. So, yes, he was a convicted felon, but he was convicted in a situation where he did not receive a fair trial and where his constitutional rights were trampled upon.
But Gary, wouldn't you agree, Gary, that, I mean, the fact that the books were monkeyed with, et cetera, and I'm not going to wear a high hat and say, everybody keeps 100% honest books and crosses every T, but there's nothing, those are facts. I mean, you may say, well, for doing that, he should have gotten 2 years, but, tampering with books and creating fake invoices, inflating them. I read the letters that you're referring to on the WhiteHouse.gov site that was signed by all those attorney generals, and in their letter they write, he tampered with financial statements, right? And I think it is somewhat humorously, and he paid some beef vendors 11 days late. I think that was the exact, was somewhat maybe paraphrasing. And for that, he got a sentence greater than, they list a whole bunch, Skilling, et cetera, people who ran off with, tens of billions of dollars. But even in their letter, they say he did tamper with financial statements. So when you say that Dershowitz says that in a fair trial he would have gotten off, I mean, that's a fact.
No, it's not actually. I'm sorry, I don't want to disagree with you. I certainly never like to disagree with anyone for whom the Kapitchenster Rebbe was his sandig, but it's not a fact. The letters that you read are not the letters that I was referring to. The letters that you read were crafted to the President of the United States in order to maximize the ability to obtain a commutation.
The argument that this Rav is making is he says you have somebody who was a felon who inflated invoices, many invoices, right, for millions of dollars, and yes, he could have paid it back, but he did inflate them, and he should have gotten 2 years and not 27 years. We could agree on that.
In order to be liable under criminal laws, you have to have criminal intent. Yes, he did authorize inflated receivables certifications and inflated inventory certifications, but he did so at the request of the bank, because the bank said to him, rather than come in for a waiver, and I'll explain to you in a simple way what the issue was. They were allowed to borrow up to 55% of inventory and 60% of receivables. So for every $100 of receivables that they had, they could borrow $60. So, and what they were doing constantly was going in and getting waivers and amending the documents. There were times when the banker said to him, you know what, Shalom, I know you only have $100 of inventory. I know you need $70 now, not $60. Say that you have 110. Don't worry about it. We'll still be fully collateralized, and we'll fix this later. Now,
can I ask you a question, Gary? You're an attorney. Gary, can I ask you a question? Could you imagine if every time there's a fraud committed, the guy says, the bank asked me to commit the fraud? I mean, what would happen to our legal system if this argument flew? I didn't do it. The bank told me to. You lied on your mortgage application. The bank told me to lie on my mortgage application. There was no intent.
Yeah, you know what, David? You know what, David?
Yeah.
You know what, David? You know what? Did you ever hear the subprime mortgage crisis? I represented. I was hired by the Federal Reserve Board and the Office of the Controller of the Currency to do a foreclosure look-back review. For 2 of the 14 major mortgage servicers. In fact, when I met Rosa Hinda Weiss the first time, I was commuting to Philadelphia because one of these large mortgage servicers, then was called Ally Bank, but originally was GMAC Mortgage, was based outside of Philadelphia, and I was commuting there weekly. And guess what? That's exactly what happened in thousands and thousands of cases. The bankers were telling the customers, inflate your income statement, inflate the value of your house, we'll be able to lend you more money. Now, whether you like it or not, that's just a fact. And you can't say how would it look
so we can,
in every single
Gary,
case.
In effect, we can never, Gary, we can never, in effect, in the United States, prosecute anybody for fraud again, because the argument is always the bank told me to do it, the vendor told me to do it. I'm just following orders. The other guy told me to inflate my statements, to lie in my thing. I mean, that's in effect the argument you're saying.
No, David, that's a silly statement. Sorry, forgive me, but that's silly. We can never again. The man can say it, but there has to be evidence to that effect. You know.
So was there evidence that the bank asked him to inflate the statements?
You know what? This is something that I can't get into under attorney-client privilege. Suffice it to say that I, as his attorney, am representing to you that had he had a fair trial and had all the facts come out of trial, he would have been acquitted. Okay? So that's number one. Number two, and by the way, Haraya, as we say in the Yeshiva, Haraya, he was indicted on over 9,000 counts of state labor law violations in a state trial after he was convicted in the federal trial. And there he got a fair trial. There was a trial by jury with a fair judge. And guess what happened? 9,000 counts. He was acquitted of all 9,000 counts. Now, you may say, wait a minute, somebody who gets indicted on 9,000 counts, it's not possible. They didn't do something wrong. It's not possible. Why would prosecutors bring 9,000 counts? And yet 9,000 counts, and he was acquitted on all of them. And to me, if you want evidence why I say that had he had a fair trial in the federal case, he would have been acquitted, the state case serves as very powerful evidence of that.
So you're saying that when this Rav says is that it's sending a bad message to our children, that somebody who was convicted and in effect was saying the system was out to get us, and this supports that idea that there's a crooked system, it's against the Jews, we're making big celebrations, we defeated Haman. You don't think that's sending a bad signal?
Something.
Point was
you are mischaracterizing what's happening here, or this Rav is, and you're just repeating it. What we're celebrating here is that someone was improperly convicted of a crime, was given a sentence that was way out of proportion to even the crime that he was convicted of, and lo and behold, later the loss that was the foundation for the 27 years, the evidence was it was the prosecutors that caused it, and ultimately the system worked because the bad people, the prosecutors who engaged in the misconduct got caught with what they did, and ultimately the system worked and the man was freed. And of course we should be celebrating that. Of course we should be.
But I think people.
To condemn the entire American judicial system, to condemn the entire American judicial system because of some prosecutors in Iowa who engaged in misconduct, that's a mischaracterization. If one person
Gary,
is bad,
in your speech,
Gary,
in your speech, you said this is a big mess that happened. We got a pardon. I don't think anybody sees this that the judicial system worked.
The whole system works. Our system of checks and balances work because ultimately, frankly, I think it's just a lack of sophistication when people make that statement. Because our system of checks and balances that were established by the founders of the Constitution, no one branch has complete ultimate authority. So you have the judiciary, but there's a check on that. And the check on that is that the President of the United States can determine that the judiciary did not act properly and can grant clemency. You have the judiciary that can say that the President of the United States, when he's restricting immigration into the United States, has gone beyond his authority. And you have the legislature that can impeach the President of the United States and can impeach judges. So we have a system of checks and balances, and guess what? It worked because, as you know...
So it wasn't a nest then. It wasn't a nest. So Gary, it wasn't a nest. It was just the judicial system worked.
David, I can't wait to meet you in person, and I hope, notwithstanding this lively dialogue, you'll still want to meet with me.
Absolutely. I'm just pointing out that I don't think anybody thinks David. This is the first time you take second what he's done in a year because the entire Jewish world pressured him. This is not the judicial system working.
David.
This is a nest.
David. Yeah. There are two concepts, and what you just said seems to, as if the one concept doesn't exist for you. Ein Simchen al hanes, which means that when you have a situation, you have to do your hishtadlus, you have to work through the system, you have to do things that are derech hateva, but at the same time, chayavin lahaker b'nes.
Yeah. So let me tell you another point. So another Rav we had on made the following point. He said, these dancings and all the celebrations, they made it onto, let's say, Google front page, which is, I actually saw it there, and was picked up nationally. And when the Goyim see this, they don't dig into the minutia. It's a bunch of bearded people jumping up and down and saying, this guy, we had some guy who was convicted. He was supposed to be for 27 years. He got out after 8 years, and the president, has an Orthodox son-in-law, and he commuted. And there were a number of articles, and you start reading the comments of these articles, and many of them are hair-raising. Like the Washington Post had 527 comments. I actually thumbed through them. Some of the comments. Here's a man who the agriculture department in Idaho, so where is it? Iowa said had the most egregious human rights violations he has ever seen. One bathroom for every 150 workers. There were many, many comments like this. And the guy said, what happened to the recognition of the Gemara in Ksubis that says, remember that you're in Gullus, you're not supposed to rate on the Umay Salam, you're not supposed to incite them. When can you think of another commutation of some guy who was in jail? You have many, African Americans who've done the 3 strikes and you're out. Obama, one guy, the last thing he stole was a cheeseburger and he got a life sentence because it was the 3rd strike. He said there was no partying then and this. It was understood. Okay, you got lucky. There was so this person is have we lost our entire sensitivity to the fact that we are guests here? This could create tremendous anti-Semitism, and if you don't believe it does, read the comments on the newspapers that picked up the dancing.
I know you're a sophisticated person, and I know you're sophisticated enough to know that everything you read in the Washington Post has nothing to do with Shalom Rubashkin. It's anything that they can do to bash Trump, and that when you have 500 comments, that most of those comments, as a matter of fact, are generated by 1 or 2 people, and it's not 500 people that are doing it, because I've been following the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the Des Moines Register, which 8 years ago was writing stories about Shalom Mordechai as if he was the worst person in the world, and there were beautiful articles about the celebration and what a wonderful day this is, which followed an editorial by the Des Moines Register's editorial board that these prosecutors need to be investigated for what they did. And second of all, there were so many things that you said here. It's so difficult to respond to all of them, to remember even all the things that you said. But the celebration here, and Larry Thompson, Louis Freeh, Judge Charles Renfrew, John Ashcroft, Edwin Meese, and Ramsey Clark. And if any of your listeners don't know who these people are, go look them up. None of them are Jewish, and every single one of them said to me, this is the most egregious case of misconduct that they've seen in their entire career. And that's what the celebration is. And he could be white, black, yellow, green, blue, or gold. That's what the celebration is. The celebration is that there was an egregious case of misconduct here, and the President of the United States had the courage to stand up to that misconduct and to provide clemency. It has nothing to do with the fact that he's Jewish. Now, of course, in the Jewish community, we're celebrating because he's one of ours, which is beautiful. But this celebration would be the same no matter what color he is by all the people in the legal establishment who aren't Jewish. And you know something? You're right that we have to behave ourselves. But that doesn't mean that if a non-Jew looks at me and says that I've done something wrong when I've done nothing wrong, I have to apologize for it.
Let's move this forward. So now you have people dancing, and they're saying we have somebody who the commutation letter that was signed by these 100 people says he committed multiple felonies, and he was released early because the sentence was too strict, and now there's big celebrating. Do you see that a guy could look at this, or somebody, an outsider could look and scratch their head and say, that's inappropriate behavior for somebody who committed multiple felonies to be having a victory lap and to having celebrations? Do you think that that's an unfair thing for somebody to view? And is that comparable? Let me just finish. And is that comparable to what you were talking about, anti-Semitism, when somebody says, I don't want Jews in my neighborhood? Would you say that somebody who takes this position is the equivalent of saying, I don't want Jews in my neighborhood, saying, hey, why are they doing big celebrating when somebody who committed multiple felonies gets out of jail early?
David, you're mischaracterizing. And in fact, you did this to me before. Are you sure you're not a lawyer? Because the way you speak, you sound like
I'm a lawyer. Every yeshiva boy
okay.
is a lawyer.
All right, because you repeated one of the big lies before, and I didn't catch you on it because you kept going. You didn't give me a chance to respond. You said there were multiple amputations in a short period of time. That is a lie. There were no amputations. The only time there was someone lost a few fingers was when he turned off the safety. He himself apologized, the man who did this. That was one of the big lies that Peter did. And in fact, agri-processors received a bonus back from the insurance company because there were so few accidents. That's the truth. Now, you want to say the lie that there were multiple violations and terrible working conditions and all those things, the big lies that these horrible prosecutors who wanted just to paint a terrible picture this man perpetrated, then you can repeat it. I can't stop you from repeating it.
Well, but you're jumping
but David, as someone who has studied this case carefully and lived through it for the last 4.5 years, those are lies. And you're repeating lies that people are doing to try to wrongfully paint a picture, as his trial lawyer, Guy Cook, said to me. Guy Cook, who's not Jewish, never knew this man before, said, Gary, Shalom Rubashkin is a saint. I've seen him. I know him. He's a saint. And what these prosecutors did is they took a saint and they made a black bearded monster out of him. And David, you're repeating what they did.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say a guy committed no felonies and a jury wrongfully convicted him of 20 felonies, right? And then he goes to jail, and then the sentence is commuted because it's too long. And then he gets released out of jail, and there's wild celebrations. And it says, this man was convicted of X felonies, and now there's a huge party. So I'm reading this, and I'm saying, well, the justice system, for the most part, is usually correct. It says he was convicted. Okay, it was too long. Wow. But now they're making huge parties? Sort of, is your average person going to say, well, maybe the conviction was wrong. Maybe he's like some guy in Murderer's Row. They found the DNA. People don't think about that. The takeaway is that Jews are celebrating because they figured out a way to sort of...
No, David, you're mischaracterizing. You're playing right into the hands of these prosecutors. The celebration here is a simple celebration. This was a case, according to 5 former living attorney generals, of the most egregious prosecutorial misconduct that they ever saw in their entire career. These are men who combined have 200 years of experience in the American judicial system. And the celebration is that this egregious misconduct, because of the compassion and the correctness of the President of the United States, was ended, and the man is released from prison. And we're celebrating the fact that this egregious misconduct was finally corrected and ended. That's the celebration. And all these things that you're saying, I don't know why you're saying it, but they're distractions. They're playing up to PETA. They're playing up to the prosecutors. They're playing up to the enemies of President Trump. That's what these things are. I'm sorry to hear the passion in my voice, but it just grates on me when anybody says this. This is terrible. This is terrible. This man, according to his non-Jewish lawyer, is a saint. And these prosecutors made him into a black-bearded monster. And what you're doing is you're repeating the Rishus that they did. David, that's not right. And any Jew that does that, I know you're just repeating what the others have said. I don't know. They weren't brought up right. What can I tell you?
You're saying again, if a guy looks at it and it says he was convicted of bank fraud and sentenced to 27 years, and he served more than 8 years of the sentence, which many have called excessive. That's what it says. It says it's not a presidential pardon. It does not vacate his conviction. It leaves in place a term of supervised release and substantial restitution obligation, which were all part of Mr. Rubashkin's sentence. Let's change this. His name isn't Mr. Rubashkin's. His name is Leroy Jackson. And now the Jews would see 10,000 African Americans or 100,000 celebrating, making sing. What would the reaction be?
If Leroy Jackson had been the victim of the most egregious misconduct in the history of the United States, and that's what people have said, this is the most egregious misconduct, this case will go down in the history books the way the Dreyfus case went down in France. That's what this case was. When people were celebrating, when Medgar Evers was walked into the University of Mississippi or Alabama, I think it was Alabama, with George Wallace standing at the door not letting him in, and when the federal government, the good federal government back in the 60s, was protecting his civil rights, and Jewish boys, not just black boys, but Jewish boys were going down there and fighting for them, and people were celebrating, the Jews were saying, thank God. And that's exactly what they'd be saying here if this was a Jew.
What an incredible journey you've had. 4.5 years of pro bono to fix a wrong, a perceived wrong. Quite an amazing story. We're going to go on to our next guest now, who's going to be speaking again about Birchas Hagomel. We have on the phone with us from Chicago, Rabbi Yisroel Langer, who's a Paisik in the Beis Hara of Chicago. He's also a rabbinic coordinator for the Chicago Rabbinical Council. Welcome, Rabbi Yisroel.
Shalom Aleichem.
Rabbi Yisroel, does a woman bench Gomel?
Mr. brings at the minute today that women do not bench Gomel. It's because Kol Kavoda Bastarach Pnima, and since Gomel has to be done in front of 10 men, so the minig is that women do not bench goimel. Lo in minig Yerushalayim, Shalom Orbach says, is that if the woman is around, let's say around family members after having a child, and it's just close family members, and there are 10 men around, so she would bench goimel.
What about a child? Does a 10-year-old bench goimel?
So again, it's also a shail in the Paiskim. Halacha, we say that a child should not bench goimel, because the nusach of the bracha is hagoimel l'chayavim tayvais, l'chayavim, somebody who is chayiv, and a katan is not somebody who is chayiv, it's not somebody who's held accountable for what they do, and so therefore they don't make the bracha hagoimel l'chayavim tayvais.
There are other opinions.
There are other opinions. Yes, there are other opinions. But the minig is that children, we never find the cotton getting up by the bima and benching goimel. That's the minig. The minig oilam is that ketanim do not bench goimel.
Rabbi Langer, if somebody had something happen to them on Monday and it's 3 days before Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's 4 days before Thursday, do they wait till Thursday or should they make it in shul not by laning?
So again, Apfel Halacha Mishabur says that to do it within 3 days. So if something happened on Monday, technically to wait till Thursday would be ready after 3 days. So it would seem that ideally one should try to do it l'chatchila within 3 days. But here again, with the minig oilam, it seems to be to wait till the day of Kriyas HaTorah, and then they'll wait till Thursday, and when they get at Kriyas HaTorah, they'll go ahead and they'll bench goimel then.
Rabbi Langer, what if somebody was in a car accident, somebody was was sick? Give us some type of a parameters of what rises to the level of goimel and what doesn't.
Okay, so to bench goimel, if somebody was almost in a sakana, that's not going to allow them to bench goimel. There's no chiv to bench. One should not bench goimel in such a situation. If one was in a car accident where they got, Rishon brings, if one got knocked hard, he was in the car accident and he got knocked. It was a kind of a knock which could potentially be fatal. So in that kind of a situation, one would bench goimel. But if one was in a near car accident where they slammed on their brakes and they didn't hit into another car, or even if their car it might have gotten hit, but they weren't knocked around at all in the car. So that was almost in a sakana. They weren't in a sakana, and then one would not bench goimel in such a situation.
If somebody leaves jail where they're in jail for something that is merely monetary matters and therefore there is no danger to their lives, as opposed to where they're in jail for something they did something that could be a life, a punishment with some type of a life-threatening punishment, what's the halacha? Does it have to be a capital event or could even be for money? When do you bench goimel?
If there's a capital event, an event where it could have been a capital punishment, so that's clear in halacha that one would bench goimel. The Maggid Avraham says that one should not bench goimel if there is no sakana involved. It's not an event which would had any risk of getting the death penalty of any sort, so one should not bench goimel. Certainly, that's by monetary situations, one, according to that, would not bench goimel. If a person did a crime or was put into a prison cell with other high criminals that do the hardcore criminals, so their pais can do say that that's also a sakana to be put in that kind of a cell together with in prison together with those kind of criminals. That itself could be a sakana and would be reason to bench goimel. But if a small crime, something not monetarily, those kinds of prisons are usually not a sakana, and one in those kind of situations, one would not bench goimel because of the Savik Birchas L'Hakel. Rishon Zalman does say that it's kedai when you're making the bracha in Shachris, when you say under the bracha you say. That's right. And using that when saying that bracha, one should have in mind anytime there's a suffix, a shaila comes up regarding benching goimel, the suffix. So it's kedai you saying the bracha anyway. Baruch Ata Hashem goimel chasadim tovim lama Yisrael, one should have in mind to cover that benching goimel. They could do it in earshot where 10 people could hear. That's it's even that would even be better.
What about people who share the simcha of the person who was saved? So the Shulchan Aruch brings that another person can also make a bracha. Have you ever seen anybody do that? What is our minig b'zman hazeh?
Okay, I was wondering about that. I have never seen that done. I've never seen it done, so I can't. I don't know. I just haven't seen it done.
It's like a Birchas haraya by Gabriel.
Right.
Okay. Are there any other chidushim in the parashas or any other areas that you think maybe the Olam is not aware of that you'd like to share with us?
There's an interesting psak for Moshe Feinstein. Moshe was known that he held that any time a person flies on an airplane, even Bisman Hazeh, where airplanes really aren't a sakana, but he held that a person flies on an airplane, one should bench goimel. So Moshe, once he came for Shabbos to Memphis, everybody was waiting. They gave Moshe Shlishi, they gave him an Aliyah, and everybody was waiting for Moshe, the Mordechai the Shmaitza, to go ahead and to bench goimel, and he didn't bench goimel.
Okay.
So they after davening, they went over to him. Ephraim Greenblatt went over to him and asked him how come he didn't bench goimel, and he explained that he only benched goimel at the end of the trip. So meaning that when he was traveling to Memphis, that's one stop on the way, then he's going to be returning back. So in that situation, he only benches goimel on the return trip once he gets back home. However, I heard from Reb Shmuel first, Shlita, that Reb Moshe held that if you go to Eretz Yisrael, that would be different. If you go to Eretz Yisrael, then one would bench goimel, even if he's returning back within a few days. And the reason is because Meher Yibon HaMikdash, and the hope is that we're going to stay in Eretz Yisrael, that it's going to end up being a prolonged stay in Eretz Yisrael, and it's not just going to be a short trip. The idea is that Eretz Yisrael, it's not just a stop along the way. Eretz Yisrael, it has it's a kvias to it, that you come to Eretz Yisrael, it's not just a stop along on your journey. That's
Well, I can't think of a better way to end our program than with that, Var. Thank you very much for sharing that story with us.
Okay,
So in closing, what do we have? We have some interesting shilos about Birchas Hagomel. I personally do not make a bracha on flying by plane. I consider it, honestly, a bracha of Atala, given where we are today. And on the Rubashkin discussion, I leave it up to my audience to listen and to cogitate about it on their own. And in closing, I got an interesting email last week. He said, David, last week you said that a person has to take their personal inventory, look into their mirror, and look for their milas. And he said, do you have any other makairis for this? You seem to think it's such an important thing. And I would like to say a fabulous makair. Let me share with you. What is the most important mitzvah in the Torah? What is the biggest klal gadol b'Torah in mitzvahs? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah, v'hafta l'reacha kamocha. And what does the Gemara in Bab Metzia say? The Gemara says, all the other mitzvahs are a sniff l'Torah, right? V'idach zil g'moir, zu ikrei shel Torah, v'idach zil g'moir. I'm the Gemara in Shabbos, when somebody came to the hill. So if this is the most important in the Torah, what does it say? V'hafta l'reacha, love your neighbor, which is basically all of Chayshim Mishpat, so much of the rest of the Shulchan Aruch. V'hafta l'reyecha kamaycha, like you love yourself. In other words, if you don't think you're worthy and you don't love yourself, you're not going to be able to be Mekayim any mitzvahs. If you're mi anaychi, who am I, ich ben agarnished, how much are you going to accomplish in life? So the Hagdama to all mitzvahs is Kamaycha, to the Klal Gadol b'Torah. So look into your Maras Hatzayvis, count your attributes, try to figure out your story. Each of us has to figure, Ma zeh biyadcha, what are the powers that were given to us? What is our story? What is your story, your unique story? When we figure that out, we have the beginning of Geula. This is David Lichtenstein for Headlines.